Hi, this video is to help with understanding factors and multiples. So first we're going to talk about the difference between factors and multiples. Let's take 12, for example, and let's look at what are the multiples of 12 versus what are the factors of 12. It's very important that you pay attention to what they're asking for. Multiples means you're going to multiply. Factors is division. So you're going to think about what numbers divide into 12 versus what do I get when I multiply 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on by 12. So multiples are going to be larger. They're going to be 12 or larger, 12 or greater, so bigger numbers, whereas factors are going to be 12 or smaller, 12 or less, because you're taking numbers that divide into 12. So let's find the multiples of 12. 12 times 1 is 12. 12 times 2 is 24. 12 times 3 is 36. 12 times 4 is 48. 12 times 5 is 60. Make sure you don't skip any. So this should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Multiples will continue. Whereas factors have a specific list and it is not going to continue like multiples. There are an exact number of factors. I always start with, when I'm finding my factors, I always start with 1. 1 divides into everything. 1 times what is 12? 12 is the largest factor. So I'm going to put it down here at the end of the list. I'm going to put 1 here at the beginning of the list. 1 is the smallest factor. 12 is the biggest factor. So the only other possibilities are every number between 1 and 12. Now I'm going to work my way up from the smallest number 1 to the next smallest number 2 and ask, does 2 divide into 12? Yes, 2 divides into 12 evenly. And I'm going to put what I get when I divide 2 into 12 here on the other side, which is 6. So now I've limited the rest of my list to everything between 2 and 6. I know, because I'm working my way up in order from the smallest numbers, that there's nothing in between 6 and 12 that could possibly divide into 12. I'm going to continue working my way up and check each number until I get to where I've gotten with the bigger numbers on this side. So I need to check 3. Does 3 divide into 12? Yes, 3 is the next smallest number. 3 divides into 12 how many times? 4 times. And now I've closed the gap. There's no numbers left then in between 3 and 4, so I know I've listed all my factors. I don't have to check 5 because my last factor pair was 3 times 4. So I know there's not going to be anything between 4 and 6 that divides into it. So with factors, it's very important that you work your way up from smallest to greatest so that you don't miss any factors. Looking at this example, find the least common multiple of 6 and 15. So if we were to find the least common multiple, least means smallest, common means that they both have, and multiple means we're finding the multiples. So let's start off with 6 and write the multiples of 6. 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 3. 6 times 4. 6 times 5. 6 times 6. 6 times 7. I can just put a dot, dot, dot. If I realize once I do my other list that I don't have any in common yet, I can come back and continue further. But let's now do multiples of 15. 15 times 1, 15 times 2. Now, if I'm paying attention, I'll realize that 15 is not in this list. So 15 would not be a common multiple because 15 is not in both lists. 30 is in this list. So I can technically stop now because there's no reason to keep going when I've found the smallest number that they have in common. So when I'm doing my second list, it's good to pay attention as I write my multiples. I said 15 times 1, my first multiple, wasn't in this list, so I know that it's not going to be in common between the two lists. 15 times 2 is 30. 30 was in this list, so now we've identified our smallest, least common in both lists of multiples. So the least common multiple between 6 and 15 would be 30. All right, we've learned about prime factorization, and you can use prime factorization to find the greatest common factor. So very similar to the previous example, except we're talking about factors here, which means we have to list factors, and then we're talking about greatest, which means the factor that they have in common that is the biggest number. So I'm going to first use prime factorization, and I'm going to write 27 as a product of prime numbers. So let's think, what divides into 27? 2 does not, but 3 does. 3 times what is 27? 3 times 9. 3 is a prime number. 9 is not, so I'm going to continue. 9 can be broken down as a product of 3 times 3. Again, 3 is a prime number. So I have now written 27 as a product of prime numbers. 3 times 3 times 3 would be the prime factorization of 27. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. My prime factorization should multiply to get me back to the original number, and my prime factorization should be all prime numbers. Let's do the same thing for 36. I know 4 times 9 is 36, but 4 and 9, neither of those are prime numbers, so I'm going to keep going. 4 breaks down into 2 times 2, which are both prime numbers. 9 breaks down into 3 times 3, which are both prime numbers. So now I know that 36 is equal to 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. And now I've listed the prime factorization of 27 and the prime factorization of 36. So if you're using the prime factorization to find the greatest common factor, you need to use all the common factors, all the common prime factors. So there aren't any 2's up here, so I'm not going to use any 2's. I have 1 3 in common. I have another 3 in common, and that's the only thing I have in common between the two prime factorizations. So now I can determine that the greatest common factor is 3 times 3, which is 9. Another way to determine greatest common factor is to list the factors of each number. So 27 factors to 1 and 27. 2 doesn't divide into it. 3 does. 3 times 9. 4 doesn't. 5 doesn't. 6 doesn't. 7 doesn't. And 8 doesn't. So that's all the factors of 27. If I list all the factors of 36, I'm going to start with 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, 5 doesn't divide into 36, 6 and 6. So I've closed the gap. 36 has a lot of factors. Now what's the greatest? So if I work my way down, 36 is not in both lists. 18 is not in both lists. 12 is not in both lists. 9 is the highest number that is in both lists. So there's two ways to think about greatest common factor. Thank you for watching.